We wanted to create a series where we go through the challenges that people have in becoming Catholic, because I was an atheist before I converted and he was a lapsed Catholic. So in order for our conversion and reversion to happen, we had to dig really, really deep.
I'm running your way, but you push me away. Your lifeline, losing your mind. I'm here for you, babe. I've loved you the same this whole time. So tell me, what's on your mind? And I'm not here to hear you say you're fine. I can take the pain you hold inside. I wanna know, wanna see it. Can I feel your kryptonite? Can't get this off my mind. Does it only control you? Let me in, I'll help you out. I won't lose you this time.
Hi, my name is Brennen Nakanes.
I'm Audra Nakanes.
And we have the world famous Father Mitch Pacwa with us today. And how should we kick this off?
Well, we wanted to create a series where we go through the challenges that people have in becoming Catholic, because I was an atheist before I converted and he was a lapsed Catholic. So in order for our conversion and reversion to happen, we had to dig really, really deep. And we had challenges because a lot of people, a lot of the evangelists and apologists that we knew, they had answers, but they didn't necessarily want to continue to answer our questions and undo a lot of the knots that we had built up because of our own experiences or what society had taught us.
Yeah, like I call it either the fortune cookie answer, is that really quick one-liner, or like the cookie cutter answer, where it may be a little bit more intricate, but it's pretty much the same thing you hear. And if you talk to one person, another person, you do it. So we like to bill ourselves as like mystery shoppers for the last 15 years of going through the process of virtually every current evangelization and
group in the Catholic Church
out there, from who would be considered more lax to who would be considered more orthodox. And in each of the situations, we believe that society has really morphed. So what we wanted to do is both go through some of our challenges and bring the best in the game in order to hopefully help to answer these questions or these challenges in a realistic way. So we encourage people to write comments, contact us with questions or problems that you might have if your son or child, your son or daughter is gone away from the church, whether it be younger or older, if you yourself have gone away, or
have doubts and questions that you feel like were never really answered. We wanted Father Mitch to be involved in this process because he is really, really good at taking things a step beyond what anyone else is. Right. So we are really, really blessed to have this opportunity. Yeah. And we just want to unknot those knots that we had. And so we're going to be pushing. We're going to be pushing Father Mitch. We're going to be asking those questions that we now, as devout Catholics, don't have, but really had for years going through the process.
Well, we may have to ask for a confession from Father Mitch in advance.
Not over the internet. You don't know who's listening, but you can make some good guesses.
Yeah.
Hello, NSA, but go ahead.
So I guess one of the first questions we'd have as far as you, Father, is one of the things that we've noticed when we've talked with people is that concept of religion or Catholicism not being relevant in their life. And as much as we look to engage them, oftentimes people will still be like, I'm fine with my life. It's good. If it works for you, that's great. But it doesn't work for me. What's one of the first things that we could do when we approach people like that and when we get that response?
One of the keys to dealing with that is to listen to what they mean by how their life works for them. What are they talking about? And is this satisfaction that life is never going to get any better? Is this, and this is what I suspect oftentimes, is it's accommodation to their own lack of peace inside. They just assume that you move from one experience to another. I'm surviving through it. Nothing big is going on. Nothing horrible is taking place until something horrible happens. And that's part of life. And their first go-to response, and this is a normal human experience, well, I don't deserve this. Well, already you're dealing with a very interesting question. What would you do to have deserved this? And if you do deserve this or not, who determines that? On what principles? These are questions that are not asked, though people feel that instinct, and underlying that is a sense of right and wrong that they don't really like thematizing. It's rather learning how to think morally is a different issue of reflection and wisdom than going by the emotional seat of your pants to react to different things as they occur. I think most folks react to the circumstances and they consider that emotional reaction to be authentic. What does that mean? What does it end up meaning? Typically, they respond with anger when things don't go their way. And our culture has become increasingly characterized by anger. And what is anger? Anger is frustration that when you have a certain expectation or a certain goal, it does not get met, and I deserve to have it met. Now I want that, I want it now, because I did what I had to do. You're messing up. And that tone of anger permeates the culture. It permeates the news. It permeates so much of so-called humor. And it even more permeates everyday speech. And I point this out because a lot of folks don't know how to reflect on whether or not their long-term or immediate goals are good ones. That not getting the expectations met, not seeing their goals met, really is not right. But on what, again, they don't think about on what basis is it not right.
Wow.
And why don't I get what I want? And how do I deal with this when I don't get it? One of the books that was popular back in the 90s characterizes a lot of our culture, namely Winning Through Intimidation. That was the title of a book. And a lot of people think that if I intimidate the people around me because I deserve to get what I determined to want, and I will intimidate you until you get it for me. Is that clear? Is that not?
Are you talking to us? You won.
Well, and it seems like that would be directly tied to the self-esteem movement as well. That we prove that we have self-esteem if we're willing to stand up for ourselves and demand our needs are met.
These are our expectations. There's so much that you just said to unpack, and obviously we'll through the series of these talks, parse those out.
In that state, in this situation where people are not able to analyze the quality of their long-term and short-term goals. They think they're being authentic to themselves, that they react immediately, which usually means with anger at the frustration of their goals. They still think, well, this works for me. Really? See, that's what I'm trying to point out. The assumption that, religion works for you, but, my attitude works for me. And I want to say, what do you mean it works? You're walking around anger, and I hear F-bombs used as punctuation. It is so typical that it doesn't even mean anything anymore. And, calling people certain names is escalating. There were certain nasty names that when I was a kid were really, really reserved for talking amongst the guys, and I imagine the ladies did the same, and you never mixed company. And now things that were even among the guys considered a high-end insult are now everyday insults.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm saying, this a constant attack on other people's dignity, this regular anger, ongoing frustration, this inability to think about what is a good goal and bad goal because I don't know what good and bad means. I don't know how to cope with my frustration of my goals, so I'm angry all the time. And that's working for you.
Right.
My life is not like that. I really don't get angry often. There are times when it is important to get angry. Again, your parents. There are times when you have to scare your children with your anger because they are doing something that is very dangerous.
Right.
Absolutely.
You want them to be absolutely terrified of what the consequences are if, as a 3-year-old, they're running around in the street to play in traffic. You want them to be terrified of that. You want them to be terrified to play with a stove or matches.
Exactly.
Because their life is at stake. As they grow older, you can deal with them differently. But at these different stages of life, there are appropriate uses of a parent's anger toward a child because they can't comprehend what being burned to death means.
Right.
Or what being hit by a car means. They have no comprehension. But they can understand, Mom means it now.
That's true.
At least that's how I remember it.
So I would love to push a little bit now at this point. Because one of the things that we have found over the years of being Catholic, and even in the process of becoming Catholic, is that unfortunately a lot of people in the Catholic Church feel the way these people do.
Yeah.
A lot of devout Catholics that are actually evangelists themselves are really angry, really frustrated, are evangelizing, but not able to sell that peace of mind and strong moral code. It's something that I even know people who either were Catholic and left or became Catholic and then ended up leaving again because they say, you know what, when I was Catholic or when I was around Catholics, I felt angry and frustrated all the time. And now I just kind of let things go. It's this sort of, whatever, I'm going to, kind of let my life happen and go with the flow. And
you see the opposite where people say like, we want the Eucharist, we want our sacraments back. And it's like, and from this standpoint, the challenge is, the rest of the world sees this and sees everything that they say. You guys are just as angry, if not more angry, because you add on everything of, like you said, expectation and I want things and this is what's right and wrong. You add all those things, and on top of that, you then add Catholicism to it.
Right.
And it makes some of these people twice as angry.
So
And,
even though, like technically speaking, what Catholicism should be giving us and what it sort of has morphed into when we allow society and the church to create our, I would guess, morality and the way that we see the world is something two different things, basically, what it's intended to be and what it is become.
Right. And then for a lot of times, the people then become like the Pharisees. They're just as blind as the people they're trying to evangelize. People are like, I'm not going to follow you. You've got the anger issues. I've seen, it's like we call it like the Wizard of Oz effect, is that you have somebody that puts on this big front, but then we talk to them when the cameras are off or when there's no audience, and they can, or maybe it's better Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. But yeah, the two different things there.
Yeah.
So the idea is everything that you're saying technically is true, but number one is not oftentimes reflected even in the people that are trying to share their faith. That's why like what do I do about my sons or daughters? Like, okay, well first you got to do something about yourself. Because I'm not going to the water that you're drinking right now. And I'm your friend. I'm not even your son or daughter. And I don't want what you have right now. Right. And it really goes back to that holiness and really living out your faith with your heart and with your mind at the same time. So that's, I think, one of the things, what would you say to the challenges of that when, let's just say you try to engage somebody and you try to get them to understand these things, and they're like, you know what?
Sort of admit where they are.
Yeah, and they're like, you know what? I'm not going to go down that road. Like, my life isn't working for me, but I'm not going to go down that road.
I've already been there, or it doesn't appeal to me.
And then the second question after that, if you'd like, is the other part of evangelists that maybe aren't quite as different as the culture as you'd want them to be. So therefore, people are like, I don't know you're a Christian by your love. It seems like you're kind of like everybody else. You're just pushing a different product. So what would you say to those 2 points?
Couple things. First of all, this goes to the Catholic understanding of the human person versus the secular understanding. Secular folks oftentimes are very naively optimistic. And frankly, I have no use for optimism. Now, why do I?
That's why we like you.
Because and by that, what I'm talking about is, optimism is this hope for some sort, and usually human planning for some wonderful state. And we can make that happen. This is what most politicians do.
Right.
And that's why everybody's frustrated with them, because they never accomplish it, or rarely do they do what they say they're going to do. And the rest of the time, they enjoy pointing out the hypocrisy of their opponents and why you should vote for me when I won't do what I say I'll do either. But, but that's optimism. And what happens with optimism, think of it this way. The National Socialist Workers' Party was an extremely optimistic vision of what should happen to Germany. But they destroyed Germany, didn't they?
Right.
Yeah. The same with the Communist Party. The Communist Party ruined Russia. And not only were, 61.9 million of their own people executed by their own government, and not only did they lose millions more, tens of millions more in warfare, but they also destroyed their environment, took away freedom, and created shared poverty, except for the Communist Party members.
Right.
And this, that to me is a picture of optimism. When you look at communism or socialism, they are extremely optimistic views of what we can accomplish. We just are logical. But when they get to the real, it fails terribly and then leads to this pessimism about life. Cynicism characterized the Russian humor, for instance. Like I don't know if you ever heard the Russian definition of capitalism and communism. Capitalism is men oppressing men. Communism is just the opposite. And this is the kind of thing that you lead to. Whereas I'm a very positive person.
Yeah.
And but it's not because I'm optimistic. It's because I'm filled with hope from God. When I look at human beings, though, I tend to be much more realistic. That's where the reality of original sin comes in.
Right.
That, excuse me, that with original sin means that due to the sin of the first human beings, there is a loss of righteousness. We're not born righteous. You two are raising children where your babies selflessly saying, oh, mom and dad need some sleep, I'll just wait.
Yeah.
Or, now let's go back to reality.
Yeah.
Hey, this is about me. I'm wet. I'm hungry. Wake up! Wake up!
They
Wake
would
up!
just go for the Wolverine.
We had a couple kids that just got violent.
Yeah. It was just, it was like the high noon.
Yeah,
they both went for the bottle, and they both they both ended up with scratches on their face going for the.
Yeah. And Scott Hahn said when he let Kimberly, sleep a bit, and he went to take care of their crying firstborn, and the kid wet all over him and threw up on him, was crying and keeping him awake. And he looked at that boy and said, you are the only little man on this planet can pee on me and vomit on me and get away with it.
Yeah.
For now.
But it points to, that babies are focused on their immediate needs. They're not generally saying, mom needs to sleep. They have no clue. That is the stance of human beings through life.
Right.
Through life, we have our immediate desires, our immediate wants, and the older we get and the more we know about various desires. When a baby's born, all they crave is sleep, their mother's milk, and to be dry. But but then they grow. Now, what happens as we get older, that the desires get more complicated, more rich, but also more disordered.
Yeah.
And that throughout life, people have disordered desires. And this shows up in all these people you're talking about. They want holiness. Yeah. But they think that Latin will save the church. No, it won't. Latin does not save the church. Jesus Christ saves the church. Not any language, not English, not correct liturgy. If you just follow the rubrics, it'll save us. No, it won't. Jesus Christ. Now, does it mean that you should do bad rubrics? No, you shouldn't disobey. But they get so focused on what they see as the antidote to the problem in front of them. Mm-hmm. They focus on getting that fixed, and I'm the one who can fix it, and I can save the church. And once you start to think like that, your own disordered desires get in the way. And the key to holiness and maturity in general is you have to learn to integrate who you are. Integrating the fact, I want things selfishly. I want to be the one who is known to have changed the church and brought back good liturgy. I want to be the one that everybody thanks for saving us from world hunger and global warming. I want to be the one that everybody loves on stage and any other sort of disordered desire. And I want to be the one who gets my way. That's where the disorder comes in. Mm-hmm. Once I start saying I got to get my way, I can run things better than anybody else. And that disordered desire is the very much what we call concupiscence. That's the fancy Latin word, concupiscentia. But concupiscence refers to having desires for good things, but out of order. So, for instance, throughout my life, I have always wanted a lot more ice cream than I ever wanted Brussels sprouts. And this is life. We want more dessert than vegetables. Mm-hmm. And we want all sorts of other things that are more obnoxious than ice cream. And we can easily become blind by our religiosity. We can use our good goals to blind ourselves to the self-centered way I want them. Again, go back to communism and National Socialism. They wanted good goals, a fair society where everybody gets what they need and shares what's ever left over from their needs. That sounds like a good goal. It's a good ideal, but they let the abstract ideal control them, and actual human beings that got in the way have to be eliminated. I'll kill you if you don't live up to my ideal society.
Right. If you don't let me help you, I'll kill you.
The same mentality shows up of people in the church. I'm right, and I will rake you over the public holes until you do what's right. As I understand it. This is the human disorder. And what folks who don't like it have to remember is that there's nothing to like about that. So that's okay. It's bad behavior. But secondly, are you using your criticism of church hypocrites as a way to blind yourself to your own hypocrisy? Mm-hmm. That's why when we Catholics say the Hail Mary, we say pray for us sinners. Now pray for them sinners that are not using Latin, that are ruining Mass, that are doing political stuff at church, who are feminists, masculinist, whoever you...
That's the updated Hail Mary. I'm not sure if you... Yeah,
I guess. Yeah, that's it. No, it's pray for us sinners.
Yeah.
And that everybody has to remember that, yes, the criticism may be true, but if I use the criticism to separate myself from the means of salvation, who am I serving? God or the enemy of our soul? Right. I'm as bad as the hypocrites because I'm saying I can't stand hypocrisy. I'm leaving.
Yeah.
No. Of course there are hypocrites in the church. But come on and join us. We'll have just one more. This is part of reality. But we also need to seek holiness and integration from Christ. And that'll mean paying attention to an examination of conscience, including of my anger at my own idealism. And, this is something that everybody has to pay attention to integrate their whole lives. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I think this is going to make a great overview of then the series of videos we're going to go through each of those points. We might actually, when we edit through this, summarize one point, because I want to make sure we've been doing this now for years and years, And we can
15.
catch those subtleties that you have, or those really important points.
Yeah.
But we want to make them nice and simple, maybe for people that haven't done this as much, so they don't miss any of the points that you had. But I think this
to all the evangelists. Oh, you're gonna record it. I was a complete pain in the butt when I was going through the process of conversion, because I just had question upon question, and every question was answered. I had another question pertaining to the question that was just answered. For me, it's what I needed because. I think when people saw me, they just saw, oh, this cute girl. This will be great. We'll become friends with her and give her some apologetics, and it'll all be good. And I'm more difficult than I look, maybe sometimes.
Well, see, that's where you have to put on Yosemite Sam. Back off, varmint.
And I think there are more people like me than people would like to admit. And had I not been willing to, I think, go through with Brennen the intense research and hours of prayer and study and trying to figure these things out, I don't think I would have become Catholic.
Right.
Because I felt like a lot of the answers were either too simplistic, or when I'd get interested and I'd like the answer and then I'd want to keep delving into it. The frustration that people would have with me literally was pushing me away from Catholicism. And people would literally just put their hands on their head and say, why can't you just accept this? What is your problem?
Yeah. And here would be my question to you. Exactly why can't you accept this? I mean, I don't want to say that as a rhetorical question. I would want to know, why don't you? Because there's another value underlying this that you're trying to protect. And it probably is a good value. As neat, and the difficulty needs to be responded to, but not say, why can't you understand this? Because I got nothing else. No.
Which really was.
Well, and to your point, I'm going to say that one of the reasons that we wanted to work with you is because I think the values that you have are so close to what we discovered with Catholicism, underlying Catholicism, honestly. There are a lot of really well-intentioned Catholic evangelists that maybe don't have their values completely in line with the church, to be honest, so that when you say,
meaning out of the group of hypocrites, you're the least hypocritical that we've met.
You know, what a great honor. I think I need a plaque for that.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Christmas present. So yeah, I mean, when you say, like, for me, I think the dignity of women was a really important one. That was a very important underlying value. Even if it's been mixed in with modernist ideas about the dignity of women, the fact that I really believed in it and it was so important to me, and I wanted to understand how God saw it, was still frustrating to people, because a lot of them, I would say, were more on the traditionalist side, that either were like, you know, you're a woman, deal with it, pretty much, to a certain degree. Like, don't worry about it. You'll get to heaven. That's all you care about anyway. You know, don't worry about anything that happens in this life.
And it was going to be a fear that you're going to be one of those people. Yeah. One of those.
We don't want you to go to this extreme over here, so let's try and pull you to this extreme, the opposite end, to make sure we don't have to worry about any murky waters.
You're one of these liberal feminists that are just going to protest everything, that hate men, that hate God, that hate, you know, our country, that hate everything.
I think I would say
John Paul, who listened to the feminist to try to listen what's going on here, and talked with great depth about the inherent dignity of women, but he spoke about it because he listened to women talk about it. And you know, having that sense, I just had a conversation yesterday. I've been counseling somebody who was considering transitioning to female. And but they've been going through counseling and stuff. And one of the mistakes sometimes is made is that, well, we just got to get the homosexuals to like women instead of guys. No.
Yeah.
That's not really saying much about women. There's implied in that women are just something that you're supposed to like. And instead of helping him deal with the issues at hand for him, right, and learning that men are not sex objects and women are not their replacement sex objects.
Right. Yeah.
That
right.
men and women both have this integrity about themselves, and our response has to be respect of that integrity, not a shift of which sex object you want.
Right.
Having people as sex objects is not healthy.
Right.
Right.
And we see in the culture, the Me Too movement is now this group of folks coming out and saying, yeah, we were objects. And it doesn't matter who you are. You can be a far left liberal or conservative. It's wrong. And that's what I think the feminists are really important on, is seeing the respect for the inherent dignity of women. What they miss is that they use models of power acquisition they see in successful men, and they make that the goal.
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
Right, absolutely. And that's one of the things that's brought up.
It's wrong for the men, too. The power acquisition.
Yeah.
Yeah.
True.
Yeah. And
humanity in general.
I think that's one of the things, I think it was said that Aquinas would oftentimes do, to say that this heresy is not in what you affirm, but rather what you deny. So the principles that you're affirming are a good thing, and that's a place that you can find a common ground with people that you don't understand. But once you deny this other part, like you said, deny the realism of being optimistic about making utopia through communism or through the Nazi Party, or any of the optimism that you might have, saying if we get rid of God and put everything on science that everything's going to happen, that's where you say you're denying the reality of the other side of it, regardless of whether or not you want to call it original sin or not. Clearly, Freud was optimistic of what that things wouldn't get so bad, and then eventually he had to be snuck out of his own country because of that. So and that's when Catholicism can actually become the most realistic religion, because we're dealing with the most realistic of circumstances. Thinking of like everybody singing and handing each other a Coke. And because everyone's all happy, I'm going through these commercials of these like utopian things. Like everything's great. We're going to pay
with the Coke.
As opposed to
What are your addictions, Audra?
We'll go through all my problems.
A Coca-Cola after 1920. Okay, but yeah, no. But yeah, as opposed to, let's just say, a riot. Yeah. Or a food shortage. And if you don't have both of those, you want to affirm, yes, the ideal that we're going after, at the same time as you don't want to deny the realism of the other place. And I think that was one of your first points, is a really great way to kick it off. That however, for each individual you're going to approach that, you have to get them to acknowledge both of those. And if they don't acknowledge both of those things, then they're really the ones that are not being realistic. They're the ones that are living more in a superstitious, why can't I say superstitious?
Some words just, they don't fall off the tongue as easily.
Yeah. A less of a realistic situation. And that's okay if that's where they are right now. Just affirm that's where you are. Yeah. And then hopefully they might eventually realize that and begin to start talking, you know what, this part of my life really isn't okay. Yeah. And then you can build from, okay, let's deal with real principles like you're doing right now, as opposed to what you didn't do in your response is take the bait of jumping for the we're going to throw you in this camp, and we don't like this camp.
Yeah.
And we thought we liked you because we thought you'd be open, but now you're not open. So, we now have to make shame you and make you a.
So that it seems like really important. What Father Mitch is pointing out is that philosophy, how important the philosophy underlying things are. So you can have hypocrites, but the philosophy that you're going back to is so important. And I would say that the love tied to the philosophy is super important.
Right.
If we don't have the love that's built into the philosophy, it can become like a very sterile, kind of cold logic that does end up feeding things like communism or other philosophies that seem like a great idea, but they really don't have the love for the human person integrated with it. I don't know if that's something we want to.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I heard from a recent guest at EWTN, Father Nathan, is that love builds the bridge between people over which truth can walk. That
Beautiful.
brings out that element that, we need to talk about the truth. But the love I have for other people makes it possible for the truth to take that walk in between us. Whereas the modern society has a conscious denial that the truth exists because they have no hope of being able to communicate.
Wow. That is beautiful. And that's differentiating between what Christ said was his form of love versus the pagan love. I think a lot of times the society secretly has a fear that you're not going to love them. You're only going to love them enough. So they realize the utilitarian, what have you done for me now model. So they both see people that way. And they also know if they don't reach other people's expectations, they're not going to get their likes. They're not going to get their phone calls returned and so forth. And so building a true love, I think is so important, becomes that bridge. And then I'd say the other part of it is, and this is one thing from a definitional standpoint, because there's a lot of definitions of love floating around. Yeah. And I think a lot of people think they're loving other people, and they're really not. What would you say to that as far as for the best way of how you would define love for people, a Christ love as opposed to a pagan one?
What I would say is to distinguish love from romance. Romance is the way most loves get started. And by I'm going to give a very wide range of romance. That would include not only when a man and a woman see each other, and as I said on my show yesterday, that women run away from us men till they catch us.
It worked, Audra.
Yeah, but there's that kind of where a couple just catch each other and say, this is a possible person for me to love. And there's a lot of romance. And as a matter of fact, I don't think there's enough romance, because in our society, they jump too quickly from romance to sex. Right. And that ruins romance. But one of the things that's going on in it is romance builds up an ideal of what this person is. That's why romantic poetry is so great. And it builds up this wonderful notion of this woman and what my life would be without her. Right. Romance also applies in a certain different sense between friends. That like you see somebody that you're playing ball with or hanging out or whatever, and say, I'd like that person to be my friend. And there's something about them that, and you idealize them.
We call that a bromance or a...
Yeah. That's a stupid name that is. But at any rate, the girl crush. In any of these things, you idealize this other person.
Mm-hmm.
But then at some point, you have to get into the process of loving this other person, at which point you realize they do not meet your expectations.
Yeah.
When honeymoons are wonderful, but they come to an end.
Yeah.
And he either, I don't know what his mother taught him, but it should have been putting his socks and underwear in the hamper.
Right.
And I don't know what her mother taught her, but she sure doesn't know how to cook as well as my mom.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
usually it's small little things that aggravate.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point of aggravation is that I just don't think this person loves me anymore. Maybe they never did. And it's at that point when you feel like I'm going to bring it to an end that you say, no, I choose this person with his or her faults. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to be their friend. I'm going to be their spouse. I'm going to be the one that loves them, no matter what those faults might be. And at that point, the romance changes to love. I think of romance as being similar to the battery on a car. It gets the engine started, mm-hmm. but you can't keep running on it. At some point, the engine producing its own electricity has to take over and start recharging the battery. Yeah. And it's that decision to choose to love that other person with their faults, not only despite their faults. I choose to love them with their faults. And I see this in older couples. I mean, couples who are married 50, 60, oldest I knew, 74 years of marriage to each other. And to see them say, I don't know why he does what he does, I just love him. And the men's typical line is, I don't know how I could have lived if it weren't for her, you know, and I don't understand her, but that's what it is. And, you know, it's that acceptance of the mystery of this other person who is beyond my comprehension. Matter of fact, I always say one of the worst things I see in a couple is when they say, I know what she's going to say. She says the same thing to me every day, and she just doesn't stop. And they know, or vice versa. And at that point, they've lost the mystery of the other person. They think they already know everything about them. And there's no jumping into loving them as they are. And that is a conversion. That is a real conversion. And it happens, I think, from what I've seen, multiple times in loves and friendships, marriages.
Yeah.
That's when love begins. When you love the other person with their weaknesses, if not obnoxiousness, mm-hmm. and you move on forward.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Oh, that was beautiful.
It is, yes. Yeah, and now I have all these questions for next time.
Oh yeah. It's every time it's like,
in this culture, they barely get to romance. They short circuit romance, where that first beginning of idealization, I want to give it a test run. I want to kick the tires in bed. And then they see this disruption. They haven't developed enough idealism and hope to be able to sustain them beyond the weaknesses to saying, I choose to love you as you are. Right. They just can't do it. And that's really missing in our culture.
Absolutely.
And that applies in lots of other things. Most people who become Catholic have a romance about the church.
Yeah.
They have a romance about.
I did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's a point at which you say, no, there's also a lot of yo-yos in high places.
Right.
And I'm going to love them anyway, just like you do with your spouse. It's that point. You're not my ideal, like I thought, but I love you. Yeah. And that may mean some changes, young man, but I love you anyway. Your kids, too. I mean, by the time they're years old,
absolutely,
and they're saying no all the time, you know, and you say, I love you, but I will wear you out, you know?
Yeah. Well, I think one of the things, as far as from the romance standpoint, and specifically in terms of relationships, is Audra and I live both sides of that coin. So when we first met, when we first started dating, or when we had known each other from Showcase years prior to it, we're both musicians, and kept in contact as far as friends. But once we looked to make a go of it, we definitely did the wrong thing, the wrong way. And so I think for a lot of people in this culture, they think, oh, well, that works for you, but you don't really understand what my life is like.
Or like one of the things that we talk to couples about,
say, tell me what your life is
stage.
Like. Yeah, exactly. We're like, how much time you got? A lot of times we'll share our lives, and they're like, wow, you actually have a worse life than I do. Because you're shocked.
Audra, sorry, I interrupted. I was just reacting to what he said, but what were you saying?
Oh, yeah. I mean, basically for the people who feel like I already messed up or I already did it the wrong way, either in my life or with my spouse, how do we do that now? We missed the romance part, or, you know, you don't understand what we've been through. You know, some people have committed adultery. Some people have literally kind of been through the ringer. They said, I don't care about his socks. I just don't, want us to cheat on each other anymore.
Right.
We still say there's hope for a marriage, there's hope for change, there's hope for romance, but obviously there's a huge philosophical change, there's a huge commitment change. There are all these things that need to happen. And one of the things that we want to do with this series is reach out to people who feel like it's too late. There's no way I could even be a good Catholic at this point. Because, I believe these things, or I supported these things, or I made these decisions in my life. And we want to be able to reach those people as well and say, yes, society messed you up in many ways. You listened to the game plan they gave you, you did it didn't work. But you can start over. Right. You can start where you are.
That is Easter. That is the transformation. And when people eventually hear more of our story, they're absolutely shocked. They're like, oh my gosh, how did you end up there? And that's the mystery of Christ, or how he can make all things new. Exactly.
Things are not nice in life, but this is where our Lord helps us to untie the knots.
Yes.
He sometimes made for ourselves. Other people around us sometimes made for us, and we didn't understand. They're all life is hard in a lot of ways, but this is where we can see that being forgiven ourselves first, then empowers us to forgive the people around us. The people who can't forgive usually have trouble bringing their sins to Christ for his forgiveness with any kind of honesty. And there's one thing, I'm sorry I did this, but there's another level of self-knowledge and repentance that we bring to Christ, and he will deal with that too. And that's where, again, there's not superficiality doesn't help at any level of life unless you're in advertising. That if you're superficial in advertising,
and even then,
even then, we saw like a commercial.
But people don't like it anymore. People want transparency, I would say, a lot more nowadays.
Transparency and some type of connection to some type of cause. They're like, is a great
I'm not going to buy
commercial.
potato chips unless you're donating to the healthcare workers on the front lines.
Yeah, yeah, it is a great commercial. But it's just
still
crazy
won't
to
be
us.
transparent. They will never say
No, that's true.
potato chips so you can get fat. They won't say that.
You know, that's a great point.
That's very
Blood
superficial.
pressure till you get a stroke. Eat salty potato chips. They won't say that.
That is a great point. We may have to call our lawyer after this, but
Yeah, I know. We'll bleep out the name. Potato chips.
That actually might be really funny.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, no, this has been absolutely incredible. There's so much there, and we're going to go through. We're going to probably chunk up some of these things for little bite sizes, so people have quick questions and answers to it. But I would love to continue.
Just think of these as M&Ms. Small bite-sized little candies.
Nice. So we start with grace and redemption. We end with potato chips and M&Ms.
Yeah.
I think that's the perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
I'm talking about potato chips and M&Ms because I didn't finish my lunch yet.
I know, I'm starting to.
Yeah. Well, I again want to thank you from the bottom of our hearts, not only spending the time today, but being willing to continue this conversation. Sure. And for anybody that's out there right now, keep the questions and comments coming so that we can offer Father Mitch the opportunity to share his years of wisdom and the gifts that God has given him to help transform the hearts and the holiness of everybody out there.
Well, thanks. God bless y'all.
Yeah.
God bless you.
All right. Take care.